First smelled like gas, and it smelled like V's, and then it smelled like death. Now, remember when we opened this? This is something that we're never going to be able to unsee. Is it a bloodbath in there?
How?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, those are the chilling words from a 911 call. Just paints a picture you really can't shake.
Absolutely horrifying.
It all happened in Sturgis, Michigan, back in May 2019. And today, we're doing a deep dive into the disappearance of Kelly Jean Warner Miller, KJ. She was 42. And honestly, the investigation that followed it's beyond disturbing.
Yeah, and what's really striking, initially anyway, was the sort of lack of immediate alarm when she went missing.
Right. Why was that?
Well, she had a pretty transient lifestyle. She was estranged from her family, struggled with mental health issues. So sadly, these periods of no contact that weren't actually seen as that unusual for her.
That's tragic in itself. It almost creates a vulnerability, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a stark reminder of how people can fall through the cracks and how, assumptions can be made.
So the police get this call. They go to this apartment building, May 22nd, almost midnight. Place looks totally normal from the outside.
Completely ordinary.
And they encounter this guy, 35-year-old Wade Allen. His initial responses. They're immediately a bit weird.
How so?
They ask about KJ. He's like, Kimberly Kelly or Kelly from the shelter, maybe KJ. Just sort of throwing names out, seem confused or evasive.
Right. That feels like trying to create distance. Like maybe he barely knew her or wants them to think he barely knew her. Deliberate ambiguity, maybe?
Seems like it. Then he says he hasn't heard from her in months. Suggests checking a shelter way over in Kalamazoo.
Trying to send them on a wild goose chase?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the officers, thankfully, they weren't just taking his word for it. They insisted, they needed to confirm she wasn't actually in the apartment.
Which is crucial police work, right?
Yeah.
Especially with vulnerable individuals. You can't just rely on what someone says. You need to verify.
Absolutely. And that's when the tension really starts to ramp up. Wade gets reluctant.
Doesn't want them inside.
Nope. Says this place is messy. He doesn't like people coming and going all the time. Which, knowing what we know now, the irony is just thick.
Yeah, worrying about a messy apartment. Well, but that reluctance itself is a sign, isn't it? Even if the excuse sounds mundane, what's he hiding?
The officers push back gently. We see all sorts of apartments and homes. Just need a quick look. Standard procedure.
Trying to de-escalate, make it seem routine. But they must have been getting suspicious.
Oh, for sure. Especially when he suggests they come back another time. That's when they mention the search warrant, potentially detaining him.
Okay, so applying pressure now.
Yep. And that changes things.
Yeah.
He finally agrees, but says only one officer can come in, the one he recognizes.
Interesting. Trying to maintain some control, pick the person he thinks might be easier.
Could be. So the officer goes in, initial walkthrough. Nothing obvious. He later said nothing in particular is jumping out.
So Wade was good at hiding things, initially at least. It shows how deceptive appearances can be, an ordinary place.
Until the officer spots this cooler, a big green one.
Ah!
The cooler.
And Wade immediately gets defensive about it, claims it's, for when the summer comes around, I'm going to have parties.
That sounds rehearsed.
Yeah.
Too specific, maybe. And why object so strongly to opening a cooler? Huge red flag.
Massive. The officer asks repeatedly to open it. Wade refuses, tries to distract them, points to the fridge. You want to look in there?
Classic deflection. Look at this harmless thing over here, not the suspicious thing I don't want you to see.
Totally. His agitation is growing. Then he's trying to avoid putting his shoes on when they move to detain him.
Stalling.
Seems like it. They get him in the patrol car, and he mentions feeling claustrophobic.
Horrible. But the officers stayed focused, right, on the cooler.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They knew the cooler was likely key. Wade eventually caves, agrees to a further search, but even then, as they're about to arrest him, he blurts out, "Everything's good."
A last-ditch attempt to seem innocent. Denial. Probably both. So they take him to the station. Initially, he seems, well, maybe not cooperative, but trying to appear somewhat normal.
Okay.
They even offer him homemade cookies. He says no at first, then takes one.
What do you make of that? Nerves, maybe? Or just weirdly detached?
Hard to say. Could be compartmentalizing. Because right after that, his story about KJ starts to change drastically.
How so?
First, she was just Kelly from the shelter, maybe KJ. Now, he's known her since 2013. They dated. She even lived with him in that apartment.
Whoa, okay, that's a major shift. That's not just remembering details, that's changing the entire relationship dynamic. Textbook deception.
Right. He's trying to build a narrative that explains her being there, maybe sets up some kind of accident story.
Which seems to be exactly what he does next.
Yep. He starts talking about how KJ had been through a lot, gets emotional, asks for time, tissues.
Trying to play the sympathy card, make himself look
It
sensitive.
looks that way. But while he's doing this, the search team back at the apartment is finding things.
What kind of thing?
Rope, bungee cords, heavy-duty trash bags, a woman's belt, and Greek girl shoes.
Okay, those aren't items associated with someone just disappearing. That points to something violent. Restraint, maybe disposal.
Exactly. It paints a very different picture than the one Wade is trying to create. His first explanation for KJ's condition.
Let me guess, an accident.
Bingo. He claims she was high for glass C, referring to her blood sugar. Apparently then she fainted in the kitchen making cereal, hit her head. Said she had speech and memory problems after that.
A convenient explanation, specific but vague enough. Doesn't quite explain needing rope and trash bags, though.
Not at all. And then there's the neighbor, Sherry.
The one he tried to borrow this off from later.
That's her. She had a sort of cordial relationship with Wade, watched TV together sometimes. But she told police something unsettling.
What was that?
Wade had told her that KJ fell, but he said it was in the bathroom, and he thought she might have a skull fracture.
Bathroom, not kitchen. Skull fracture mentioned. That's a major inconsistency.
Huge. And when Sherry expressed concern, Wade apparently just said, "I'm taking care of her."
Oof, that sounds possessive. And dismissive of the potential seriousness. I'm taking care of her, not we need to get her help.
Exactly. The stories don't match. Kitchen fall, bathroom fall. It screams fabrication.
Definitely a red flag for investigators.
Wade then doubled down on the neglect narrative. Claimed KJ couldn't eat or drink properly after the supposed fall, but he never sought medical attention.
What was his excuse?
He said, I didn't know if she could move or get around. Her motor skills were not good. It's just baffling negligence, even if you believe the fall story, which seems increasingly unlikely.
It points to either extreme neglect or, more likely, deliberately avoiding medical professionals who would see her actual condition.
He even threw in that he supposedly talked to her caseworker about adult foster care because she had bladder control issues.
Trying to build that picture of declining health again, making it seem plausible she might just fade away or die naturally.
But Sherry, the neighbor, she was getting creeped out by Wade. And then he drops this bombshell on her, completely unprompted.
What did he say?
Knowing Sherry had a history of domestic violence, he tells her he hits women, but he's working on it.
Whoa. That's incredibly manipulative and disturbing. Why would he tell her that?
Maybe trying to bond or test her reaction. Whatever the reason, it terrified Sherry.
I bet. She said she felt he could do anything after that, right? Started limiting contact.
She did. Her gut feeling was screaming danger. Smart move.
Absolutely. Her intuition was spot on.
So back at the station, Wade finally gets to his version of KJ's death. He claims it happened about 2 weeks after this supposed fall. The pressure's on. Police are searching his place.
Setting the stage for a tragic accident narrative linked to the fall.
Exactly. He says he thought she'd be okay taking a bath lying down. Then he claims he found her with burnt feet, implying she somehow turned on scalding water and couldn't adjust it or get out.
That makes no sense. If her motor skills were as bad as he claimed, how did she do that? And burns like that.
Right. And then, the kicker, he says he found her like that, with burnt feet, in the tub. And he just went to sleep.
He went to sleep, believing she'd be okay.
That's what he claimed. The officers were openly skeptical. They noted he was either not all there or a very good manipulator.
I think the evidence points strongly towards manipulator. That story is just unbelievable.
Totally. And meanwhile, back at the apartment, the physical evidence demolishes his story anyway. They find cast off.
Blood spatter, consistent with impact.
Consistent with something hitting the bathroom floor with force. Not a gentle fall, not an accidental bath incident. Violence.
That changes everything. Physical proof contradicting his narrative.
So Wade revises his story again. Now, he says he found her in the morning, not breathing. The water was off, but her head was below the waterline.
Okay, so now it's a drowning. After the fall, after the burns. But still, he didn't call 911.
Never called anyone. His inaction is staggering.
Unless he had a reason not to call. Like, he was responsible.
Which brings us to the 911 call that started it all. It turns out Wade had told someone, his friend, Stephen Ryan Russ. He was the caller.
Ah, so the caller knew Wade. What made him call?
Fear. Not necessarily for KJ initially, but for his own family. Wade had been sending Stephen disturbing Facebook messages.
What kind of messages?
basically admitting he did something he couldn't talk about, revealing KJ had passed away unexpectedly, and then asking Stephen for help moving the body.
Wow, okay, that's a confession. And asking for help with a cover-up?
Absolutely. Stephen and his brother, thankfully, refused to help. Stephen apparently promised Wade he'd keep quiet at first.
But he couldn't.
Couldn't live with it,
Yeah.
especially with the implications for his family's safety. He made the call. That was pivotal.
Huge turning point. An external witness confirming Wade knew she was dead and was trying to conceal it.
Wade tried to justify not calling 911 himself by saying he was afraid he'd be wrongly accused.
The classic "I panicked" defense doesn't hold much water when you're asking friends to help move a body.
Right. And Stephen told police he'd actually visited Wade's apartment after KJ died. And Wade asked him if he wanted to see the body.
Chilling. Just the casualness of that offer. What did Stephen say?
He refused.
Yeah.
Stephen's theory was Wade kept the body simply because he didn't know how else to get rid of it. Just grim logistics.
A practical, if horrifying, explanation.
But Wade later tried to frame it differently. Claimed he wanted to give her a proper burial and wanted to be able to visit her grave.
That sounds less like grief and more like control. Possessiveness, even after death. It's deeply unsettling.
It really is. And then Wade provides the timeline of what he did after finding her dead, according to his story. And this is where it gets truly, truly sickening.
Brace ourselves.
He said he ran cold water on her body in the tub. Why? He thought it would preserve her, like he'd seen on detective shows.
Oh my God, he's getting preservation tips from TV while her body decomposes.
He admitted he knew about decomposition, blood settling, fingers blackening, stiffness coming and going. He saw all that happening and still did nothing except run cold water.
The disconnect is profound.
Then, around April 12th, he claims she died around April 6th, so 6 days later, he goes out and buys supplies.
Let me guess. Coolers?
2 large coolers, air fresheners, and 30-gallon trash bags. Clear premeditation to dispose of the body.
He knew what he was doing, planning the concealment.
And then comes the part that's just almost impossible to comprehend. He admits he couldn't fit her whole body into the coolers.
Don't tell me.
He had to cut off her legs.
Oh, God.
He described it with this chilling matter-of-factness. Said the body was too big and too stiff to position. He asked her earlier if he could borrow a saw, claiming it was to cut up an old mattress.
The mattress excuse again. She didn't lend it to him, did she?
No. So Wade went and bought his own saw from a supermarket.
But bought a saw specifically for this.
Yes. He told police where he cut her legs, thighs, and lower legs. Said he wanted to wash her off first, but claimed she was too heavy to move easily.
The level of detail is horrifying. The calculation involved.
And back at the apartment, the police find exactly what he described. KJ's dismembered body parts in those 2 green coolers.
Head, arms, torso in one.
Yes. Naked, signs of decomposition, insects, and the detached legs cut above the knee in the other. The 911 caller's worst fears realized.
Just nightmarish. Absolutely nightmarish.
They also collected other items near the coolers. Clear safety goggles, rubber gloves, more bungee cords, a black belt, and a white ribbon.
Oh, white ribbon. Seems out of place.
It seemed innocuous at first, just a piece of white ribbon. But hold on to that detail. It becomes incredibly important later.
Okay. What happened to the saw?
Wade got rid of it. He traded it for a DVD player with someone he knew from the host system.
Traded the murder weapon, essentially, for a DVD player. The callousness.
But the person who received the saw told a slightly different story. He said Wade was really insisting he take the saw right then, and he noticed something on the blade. Described it as looking like a chunk of something.
Suggesting it wasn't cleaned properly.
Exactly. DNA tests on the blade later indicated the possibility of blood, though maybe not enough for a full profile.
Still, more corroborating evidence.
And the same person recalled visiting Wade's apartment around that time and smelling something awful, like something dead. He initially thought maybe Wade just had really bad bowel problems.
The reality being so much worse. That smell the 911 caller mentioned. Decomposition.
Precisely. Now, let's circle back to Sherry, the neighbor, for a moment.
Yeah.
She recalled another disturbing incident.
There's more.
Yes. She knocked on Wade's door once asking for coffee. KJ answered the door completely naked.
Naked? Why?
KJ apparently agreed to send Wade over with the coffee. Later, Wade came over, furious that KJ had opened the door like that. He admitted to Sherry that he forced KJ to walk around naked sometimes and threatened to get the belt out.
Controlling, abusive, and humiliating. Using nakedness as punishment and control. The belt threat.
And remember Wade telling Sherry about his past domestic violence incidents? How they were dismissed? It sounded almost like bragging.
Like he knew how to get away with it, calculated.
He also admitted to police, almost casually, that yeah, he forced KJ to be naked. He admitted kicking her in the butt once because he thought she was cheating, but then tried to say bruises on her ankles were from a fall near railroad tracks, not his kicking.
Lies upon lies. Deflection. Minimization. It's a clear pattern.
And through all this horrific recounting, remember those cookies? He was eating them at the station, knowing what police were finding.
The detachment is just chilling. A profound lack of empathy or remorse.
He even mused aloud, asking the police if things would have been different if he'd called for help when he first found KJ unresponsive.
A weak, self-serving question after the fact. Trying to appear regretful.
Maybe. But then he admits something else. He admits using a belt on KJ just a day or two before she died.
Why?
As punishment. For coming back, maybe meaning coming back home after leaving, or perhaps regaining consciousness briefly. He said he used the belt because he didn't want to use his hands anymore.
Deliberately choosing a weapon. Escalating the violence. This aligns with Sherry's theory that he was keeping KJ hidden, right?
Tragically, yes. It sounds like she was being held captive, abused, which led the police to ask a very pointed question.
What was that?
We're not going to find any belt marks around her neck, are we?
Direct. Targeting strangulation. How did Wade react?
He was evasive. Didn't give a straight answer, which of course raised massive alarms.
Suggests they hit a nerve. That he knew there might be marks on her neck.
Then police spoke to an ex-girlfriend, Katie. Short relationship, but deeply abusive. It ended when he threatened to break her arm in front of her own children.
Horrifying. Shows a clear pattern of violence against partners.
Katie said something really chilling. If I wouldn't have ended things when I did, that would have been it. And that's terrifying to me. She believed he would have killed her.
A lucky escape for her, but underscores the danger KJ was in.
Wade continued to contradict himself during questioning. He claimed he never saw KJ scream in pain, only cried twice from pain unspecified causes, and twice when he left her alone.
Minimizing her suffering again. Trying to control the narrative of her experience.
He seemed reluctant to talk about causing her pain, saying, it's not something I get a thrill out of.
Which sounds incredibly hollow given everything else. Actions.
Between the two of you. Like her lips might be messed up. Wade just insisted the night she died was peaceful.
A blatant lie, given the evidence and his own admissions of belt use just before.
The officer made one last attempt before leaving the interview room. Look me straight in the eye and tell me that you're not the cause of her death.
And Wade...
Looked him in the eye and said, no, I'm not.
It's just cold denial.
But the real story, the full, unimaginable horror came out after Wade was booked from his cellmates.
Ah, jailhouse confessions. What did they say?
They told investigators that Wade wasn't quiet about it. He bragged. He proudly confessed to murdering KJ.
How did he say he did it?
Remember that white ribbon?
Yeah. Oh, no.
He told them he held KJ down on the bed with the white ribbon wrapped around her neck, watched the clock, held it for 5 minutes till she stopped breathing.
5 minutes. Calculated murder by strangulation using that ribbon.
And then he claimed he brought her back with CPR.
What? Why? Torture. A power trip.
It sounds like it. The cellmates painted a picture of extreme jealousy and control. Said he tied KJ up and put her in a closet when he went to work once because she'd confided in a friend that he was too rough with her.
Punishing her for seeking help, isolating her completely.
And the cruelty escalated. He admitted to gagging her with a screwdriver handle wrapped in a wet rag, like a horse bit, to keep her quiet while tied up.
That's just medieval torture, the level of sadism.
They said Wade admitted choking her, not just once but repeatedly, to the brink of death. This apparently went on until she was left essentially brain dead, no motor function, couldn't speak, no bowel or bladder control, for 2 weeks before she finally died.
2 weeks? She was alive but incapacitated, suffering that whole time, while he pretended she just had a fall.
Exactly. He even admitted smacking her sometimes to try and make her come back, but she was never coherent again after the choking incidents.
He destroyed her, kept her alive in that state, and then let her die.
The cellmates recounted even more horrific acts of torture Wade confessed to, putting his hand over her mouth and nose just to see if she would die, burning her tongue, her clitoris, her nipples with a torch.
Why? Why would he do that?
His supposed reasoning, so that she would never feel arousal from another male again. Utterly depraved jealousy and control. He also admitted dumping scalding hot water on her feet, explaining the burns he mentioned earlier.
So the burns weren't an accident at all. They were deliberate torture.
Correct. And then, the final, unthinkable act confessed to the cellmates.
I'm almost afraid to ask.
Necrophilia. He admitted to having sex with KJ's body after she was dead, warming it in the bathtub first.
That is beyond words. The ultimate desecration.
It ties back to Sherry noticing that awful smell, doesn't it? The smell Wade dismissed as a mouse, then like gas, like V's, like death. It was KJ, decomposing after weeks of torture and her eventual death.
Her instincts were right all along. She was smelling death.
The medical examiner's autopsy findings backed up the cellmates' accounts. Multiple bruises, chin, neck, right ear, and critically, a fractured hyoid bone.
The hyoid bone, a classic indicator of strangulation.
Exactly. The official cause of death was ruled homicide by unspecified means, but the hyoid fracture pointed directly at strangulation, just like the cellmate said Wade described.
The pieces all fit. A horrifying picture, but consistent.
While in jail, Wade was apparently observed watching the show Criminal Minds and commenting on how he could have done things differently better.
No remorse, just analyzing his technique. It's sociopathic.
He bragged about what he did. He even gave himself a nickname, Chops, presumably referring to the dismemberment. Talk about wanting to write a book.
Glorifying his actions, seeking notoriety. Absolutely sickening.
And remember him claiming nobody wanted her. Utterly false. KJ had family who were concerned, who were looking for her. It was just another cruel attempt to dehumanize her.
Makes his actions seem even more callous, destroying someone who was loved and missed.
Sherry's reaction when she learned the truth was probably shared by many. Horror and the realization that you just don't know people.
No, you really don't. Someone can seem normal, cordial, and hide unimaginable darkness.
There were some legal hurdles. The initial warrantless searches were deemed unconstitutional. Some police reports apparently had false claims about smelling decomposition before entering, which officers later recanted.
So potential issues with the initial evidence gathering.
Yes, but the appellate court ultimately ruled that the discovery of the coolers in KJ's body was inevitable. They would have gotten a warrant based on the information they had, especially Stephen Russ's call and Wade's own suspicious behavior.
So the core evidence held up.
It did. In 2023, Wade Allen pleaded no contest to second-degree murder and mutilation of a dead body. He was sentenced to 39 to 60 years in prison.
A long sentence, but perhaps feels inadequate for the sheer level of torture and depravity.
And his violence didn't stop. He was later convicted of assaulting a fellow inmate specifically, one of the cellmates who had spoken to the police about his confession.
Retaliation shows he hasn't changed.
So this deep dive really exposes how ordinary appearances can mask just unimaginable brutality. The details of what Wade Allen did to Kelly Jean Warner Miller are truly the stuff of nightmares.
Absolutely. I think the key takeaways here are stark. First, how deceptive appearances can be. Second, the vital importance of trusting your gut instincts like Sherry did. And third, just the horrifying capacity for cruelty that humans can possess, hidden away.
It leaves you with a really unsettling thought, doesn't it? When you hear a case like this, you have to wonder about the hidden darkness that might exist behind other ordinary facades. What allows such depravity to develop? It's a deeply disturbing question about human nature itself.